Good evening. Hope everybody's having a good weekend and staying safe. We know it's a jungle out there, man. Jimmy here in Chicago. We're going to go back and wrap up the Gus Alex trial. And in my last video, I mentioned that I really don't like to be there when the verdict's read or during sentencing. To me, tensions are a little high. There's a lot of emotion in the courtroom. There's a lot at stake. It could be a little personal. And sometimes it's like a freaking funeral in that courtroom when you've got family members of the defendant and family and friends of the victim that are close proximity to you crying in the courtroom. I was in court, though, when the Gus Alex verdict was read. This poor man stood up. He was white as a ghost. His left hand and legs were shaking. He was literally trembling as the jury foreman read the verdict. He said that Gus Alex and all the defendants were all found guilty on every count. Gus Alex started to cry a little bit, took off his watch, took the money out of his pocket, handed it to his attorney, blew a kiss to his girlfriend that was in court every day supporting him. And unfortunately for Gus, the judge agreed with the prosecutor that he was indeed a flight risk due to his wealth and all of his connections. So they took him into custody immediately. And I think out of respect of his age, his reputation, and health, the federal marshals did not cuff him in court. But man, I'll never forget seeing him in his late 70s being escorted out of the courtroom by two federal marshals into the back gallows. This was devastating for Gus Alex. Pretty much a death sentence. He was given 15 years. Poor guy ended up dying in his late 80s. But this was a major victory for the prosecution. They really hit the ball out of the ballpark. Finally, they were able to convict a high-ranking member of Chicago outfit, something that's never been done before. But the government wasn't done with Gus Alex. They were just getting started. They were going after all these guys now, using a very similar strategy, same techniques, in some cases, using the same government informants. Now, back in 1993, the second major federal trial I went to was the Sam Carlisi trial. Originally, there was like 10, 12 defendants. A couple of them pled guilty. But when I was in court, there were 8 defendants. These guys were charged in a 7-count RICO case of running a multi-million-dollar gambling operation in DuPage County, extortion, loan sharking, arson, you know, the usual. They even had a conspiracy on an attempted murder. Imagine being in the courtroom and all these heavyweights of the Chicago outfit are there. There you got not only the boss of Chicago outfit at the time, but the government alleged that Sam Carlisi was the boss of the crew. Right next to him, you got little Jimmy Marcello. I'll never forget seeing Jimmy Marcello eat Skittles pretty much throughout the whole trial and occasionally whisper to his attorney. And then right next to him, you got Tony Zizzo. He would actually laugh out loud in the courtroom when a few of the victims, some of the government witnesses, were testifying how they got beaten and choked. And then at the very end there, pretty much the devil himself, aside from that scoundrel Lenny Patrick, this was probably the meanest man I've ever seen, Anthony the Hatch. He definitely couldn't not control himself in court. At times, he would make outbursts in the court. He would be arguing, fighting with his lawyer. And his lawyer, Joe Lopez, told me that Anthony the Hatch was much more difficult to handle than Frank Calabrese. And on the front, you got a couple of the Bonavolante brothers and a couple of the defendants. A few of the guys were out on bond, but most of the heavyweights in the back were all in custody. Now here's Sam Carlisi, a.k.a. Black Sam. This guy was a high-ranking Chicago outfit boss. He was the underboss of Joey Aiuppa. several years ago. His brother was a made member of the Buffalo crime family in New York. He had three cousins that were all made members of the Chicago outfit: Dominic and Nick DeGrazia, and Al, the pizza man, Tornabini. Now, with Tornabini, nobody really heard of Tornabini up until the Family Secrets trial. He's an old dinosaur in the Chicago outfit that led a very low profile, just like Tony Accardo, Carlo Gambino. But according to Nick Calabrese, Tornabini, along with boss of Chicago outfit Joey Aiuppa, that they actually led the making ceremony of Frank Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, Jimmy Marcello, Anthony Chiramanti, Tony Zizzo, and others. A lot of the men at this trial were all made on the same day. Nick also said that Carlisi was there at the making ceremony to sponsor a couple of his guys from Melrose Park. Now, the government alleged that not only was Carlisi boss of a multi-million-dollar gambling crew, but he was actually the boss of Chicago outfit. And anytime the prosecutor or one of the government's witnesses would refer to Carlisi as boss of the outfit, he would lose his mind. He would literally yell out, calling the witnesses liars. At one point, he told the judge, "I can't take it anymore. I can't listen to these lies." Several times the judge had to halt the courtroom. The jury had to leave the courtroom, and the judge would reprimand Carlisi many times. Even little Jimmy Marcello and Carlisi's lawyer had to calm him down. For the most part, Wings was on his best behavior, but he would only get aggravated when they referred to him as the boss. He flat out denied being the boss of the Chicago outfit. The government alleged that not only did this crew make millions of dollars, they had over 800 customers. I mean, this is just in DuPage County. And all of their bookies, on an average, brought in $120,000 every weekend. Now, here's Wings walking into court one day. They call him Wings because he literally flew all over the world on Chicago outfit business. But this was at a trial with him, John No-Nos DeFranzo, and a couple other outfit guys. They got indicted for skimming an Indian casino. And Carlisi, when he was trying to retire from the outfit during his older age, he spent a lot of time in Florida, Boca Raton, Miami Beach area. And he was coming back to Chicago from Florida at O'Hare, and the government arrested him at O'Hare Airport on his 71st birthday. I can just imagine how livid Carlisi was. Now, pretty much all 8 witnesses testified that Sam Carlisi was the overseer of the crew and benefited the most. The government alleged Carlisi himself generated around $3.5 million. He was in his late 70s at the time, very high-ranking member of the Chicago outfit. He was somewhat like the treasurer of the outfit, if you will. And we all know that Carlisi was a stand-up guy. Most of the guys in the Chicago outfit, unlike Philly and New York, weren't very easy to flip and cooperate. Couple of the main charges against Carlisi was he thought for sure one of his close friends and a major guy in the crew, Anthony Jeeps Dodano, was going to cooperate and flip. So Carlisi basically gave the green light to Jimmy Marcello and the rest of the Chicago outfit to basically kill Jeeps on sight, but they had a hell of a time getting a tail on Jeeps. The evidence was overwhelming that the intent was there to kill Jeeps, but luckily for Jeeps, the crew actually never got a hold of him. Another charge against Carlisi was there was a successful theater owner. This guy owned like 10, 12 theaters. And Carlisi told little Jimmy Marcello, I want you to send him a message. So Marcello reached out to Lenny Patrick, and Lenny Patrick's crew, James Lavelli and Nick Geo, started extorting theaters, and the ones that would not get in line, they were fucking firebombed. Now, during the opening statements, the prosecution showed this photo. This was allowed into evidence. This was Sam Carlisi, underboss, and Joey Aiuppa, boss of Chicago outfit. And as we all know, Aiuppa led the outfit with an iron fist. He is alleged to have ordered over 100 murders. And when he went to prison with Jack Cerrone during the strawman case and others, he told Carlisi and Ferriola, according to Nick's testimony, I want them both knocked down. Number one. Number two, I don't care how you do it, just do it. And after that, plan A of the Spalatro killing was set to play. Sam Carlisi, Joey Aiuppa, James Turturello, who died of natural causes, Joe Ferriola, who died of natural causes. These were all great leaders. If some of these guys didn't die of natural causes or didn't end up in the can, I believe the outfit would still be going strong today. But we lost a lot of our great leaders, and then after that, it kind of fell apart. Now, I'll never forget seeing Nick Calabrese testify in court. The longer he was on the stand, the more comfortable he got. He never once looked over at his brother, Frank Calabrese, who was glaring at him, trying to intimidate him. And he never looked at Jimmy Marcello, who he testified against, or any of the other defendants. He pretty much stared straight ahead, looked at the jury, and sometimes looked down at the floor, ashamed of himself, the fucking coward that he was. Nick Calabrese was no angel. However, he had so much detail. The juror found most of what he said credible. I found most of Nick's testimony credible as well, except with maybe 2 or 3 little lies I think he told. But according to Nick Calabrese, he testified that when the Spalatros were killed that day, little Jimmy picked up him, Feccarata, and Jimmy LaPetria at a Ventura parking lot. Jimmy had a real fancy van. Jimmy dropped these guys off at the house in Bensonville. They got there early. When they walked down the stairs, the first man to greet them was Sam Carlisi. Carlisi made a couple wisecracks about Nick's tan, all the money they were spending, and all the time they were spending out west when they were supposed to be tailgating the Spalatros. That made Nick feel a little uncomfortable, a little uneasy, but the two of them had a pretty good relationship, and Wings actually got a kick out of Nick. He liked him. However, Feccarata beelined it right to the bathroom. Nick noticed that Feccarata was in there a long time. And when Feccarata finally came out, Nick said he was white as a fucking ghost. Now, I want to bring this up. Nick Calabrese, who was there that day as one of the killers of the Spalatro, never once said Frankie Schweiss was at that house, and he certainly never said they all sat around and drank scotch. This is just one of many lies that creep, government informant, rat snitch who got chased out of Chicago, Red Wimet claims. So I just want to make that clear. Also, according to Nick Calabrese, him and little Jimmy Marcello talked about how they had to kill Nicholas D'Andrea. They reminisced about this when they were locked up together as cellmates in Milan, Michigan. And they were talking about how strong Nicholas D'Andrea was. When they finally were able to subdue him, James Turturello, Sam Carlisi got a hold of him next. They were trying to find out information on the assassination attempt on Al Pilato. And according to Nick, Carlisi got carried away. He repeatedly kept cracking gun butting, cracking Nicholas DeAndre in the head, and eventually kind of accidentally killing him. And why Nick was testifying to this, DeAndrea's son, who's kind of like a muscle, ripped dude, built dude, he was glaring at Jimmy Marcello and Nick Calabrese. I thought for sure he was going to jump over the wall and go after Marcello. However, Marcello paid him no mind, and Nick Calabrese basically ghosted him. But just to see Nicholas DeAndrea reaction, just like Ortiz or the Seiferts, to see these victims in the courtroom 10 feet away from their killer, there's nothing quite like seeing that drama in the courtroom. Now here's little Jimmy Marcello, Jimmy the man. And I probably have the most empathy out of him, out of all the mob guys that I've seen. I actually seen him twice. His first trial, he was like 52 years old. He sat right next to Sam Carlisi. He was Carlisi's right-hand man, chauffeur, underboss. The government alleged that little Jimmy financed Lenny Patrick's juice loan operation. And I'll never forget when I first laid eyes on this man in 1993. And then I seen him years later in 2005 at the Family Secrets trial. I was shocked at how much he has aged by being locked up for so many years. This guy never rat, he never rolled, never even once thought of cooperating. His father was killed by the outfit years ago. He eventually took revenge. But Nick Calabrese testified that when they were locked up together, Nick was complaining that he was doing a lot of work for Frank and Angelo and he wasn't getting paid, and how rough it was and how brutal it was to work for his brother. So Jimmy offered for him to come work for Jimmy's crew when they got out. And immediately, Jimmy Marcello had his brother Mikey Marcello start dropping off $5,000 a month to Nick Calabrese's wife so she could feed her and her family. And then, of course, Nick Calabrese decides to tell the government that it was Jimmy Marcello that picked him up to drive him to the house in Bensonville. At first, he lied to the fucking cops. When he sat down with the agents, he said that Theckerata drove those guys to the house in Bensonville. Then he slept on it. He thought to himself, oh, he better come clean. Then he changed his mind and said that it was Jimmy Marcello that picked him up. Also, at the Family Secrets trial, Jimmy Marcello was paying his mistress several thousands of dollars a month. He put her up in her own business, vacations. He even paid for her retarded son's health care. And when Jimmy Marcello's wife found out, not only that he had a mistress, but all the money he spent on her, Jimmy Marcello just wanted to bury himself under the fucking table, under the defense table. He had great lawyers. He had Tom Breen and Mike Martins, two of the best. But like all these cases, the evidence is overwhelming. Jimmy Marcello gave direct orders to Tony Zizzo and Anthony the Hatch anytime there had to be some serious work done. Those were his two Dobermans, if you will. So here's Jimmy. He goes away for the Sam Carlisi trial, comes home, and he's only home for just a few months before he gets indicted on the Family Secrets trial. Now, third in command in the pecking order at the Sam Carlisi trial, you got Anthony Little Toe Zizzo. He was 58 years old at the time, from Melrose Park, made member of the Chicago outfit. He was pretty much the bank, the loan shark of the crew, if you will. And anytime he had any problems with his debtors, he would send his personal attack dog, Anthony Hatch Chiramanti, on him. And if you owed money and were late, believe me, you didn't want these guys on you. Years later, after the Family Secrets trial, Zizzo got into an altercation, had a little beef with Large and another outfit guy. They had a meeting. He was going to go to a meeting in the Viagra Triangle area, Rush Street, downtown Chicago. He went to Ambruzzo's neighborhood restaurant, Melrose Park, parked his car, and that was the last place he was seen alive. Zizzo never made it to that meeting on Rush Street, and a lot of people think that that was one of the very last hits of the outfit, because when little Jimmy Marcello went away in the family secrets trial, Zizzo not only lost one of his best friends, but he lost his protector. He lost all the power. Nobody was going to fuck with Zizzo if Marcello was out of the can or if he was in charge. Me personally, though, I really don't know, but I have a feeling he didn't want to end up in prison like little Jimmy and his other friends. And I think he lammed it. I think he planned it and went on the lam. And hopefully we'll find out one day. But if his MIA so-called murder is solved, I'll definitely go to that trial. Can you imagine being in the same room as this guy here? Look at those eyes. Anthony the Hatch Chiramanti, made member of the Chicago outfit, an enforcer, ran a hell of a loan sharking juice operation. He was one of the defendants at the Sam Carlisi, and he was basically their enforcer. He would beat, choke, kick, stomp, sometimes stab some of the degenerate gamblers and debtors that were on his payroll that weren't paying. In one particular popular trucking executive, Barbara, good friends with Mayor Daley, he needed a loan for more equipment, and he got behind on his payments, and he's actually wearing a wire. But the Hatch didn't know he was wearing a wire, and you could hear the Hatch when they played that tape in the courtroom. You could hear the Hatch threatening him, screaming, swearing at him, and stabbing him, all on tape. The whole courtroom almost froze. Also, this guy could not control himself. He went off on several tyrants in the courtroom, yelling at his lawyer, yelling at some of the witnesses. I thought for sure the marshals were going to jump on him and cuff him up. The courtroom was cleared several times, and afterwards, Joe the Shark Lopez told me that the Hatch was 10 times worse to control than Frank Calabrese during the family secret trial. But this guy was probably one of the most despicable, evil, mean men I've ever seen. And to hear his voice on those tapes was really something to see. Now, a little off subject here, but back to the Hatch. Years later, he had beef with Frankie Schweiss and another outfit guy, I'm forgetting his name. The bosses had enough of Anthony Chiramanti and his sadistic ways. So they had this guy here, Tough Tony Calabrese, the other Calabrese, no relation to Nick or Frank. He pulled up at a Brown's Chicken in Lyons, Illinois, a place I'm very familiar with. They had a somewhat of an argument, yelling, swearing, and the Calabrese shot and killed Anthony Chiramanti, which was a real tough guy to kill. But he got the job done, and that's where Chiramanti was killed, right there in Lyons, Illinois. I went to the Calabrese trial as well. That was brought up, but the government was not able to prove it. It's still an unsolved case, but Tony Calabrese is the alleged killer of Anthony the Hatch. And of course, we've got the Jewish gangster, scumbag, lowlife, jagoff, Lenny Patrick. The jury believed him during the Gus Alex trial, so they used Patrick again to testify against Sam Carlisi and the crew. He testified that Carlisi and Jimmy Marcello financed his loan operation. He also said that he did a lot of the dirty work for the crew. He showed no remorse, made a joke out of the jury system. He actually said that taking the oath meant absolutely nothing to him. He repeatedly said that Sam Carlisi was the boss of the Chicago outfit. I thought for sure Wings was going to attack him. But this is what the government does. They make a deal with the devil to go after some of the higher ups. But this was the second time, unfortunately, that I had to sit through Lenny Patrick's testimony. He was a little bit more comfortable on the stand and not as bad as he was during the Gus Alex trial. But again, if I'm on the jury, there's no fucking way I'm going to let a guy like this who committed 6 murders and shot and bombed over 20, 30 people. I'm sorry, I cannot give a guy like this a pass. But this was the main defendant at the Sam Carlisi trial that did the pretty much the most damage. Next on the witness stand, you've got James Lavelli. Same thing. He testified against Lenny Patrick. He bragged that they did all the special jobs, all the hard hits that the other crews couldn't do. Basically bragging that he was a great outfit guy. Came across pretty credible though. He testified how he schooled Nicky Gio and testified that he reported to Mario Ranone, and Mario Ranone reported to Lenny Patrick. Lenny Patrick reported to Carlisi. Carlisi and Marcello financed the whole thing. This fucking asshole basically gave the government from A to Z an organizational chart on who was, is, and who's upcoming in the Chicago outfit. He basically spilled all because he didn't want to go to jail. He was one of the guys that was basically extorting local businesses with violence. He also was on the lookout to kill Jeep on the spot. He got the green light from Mario Ranone, and him and Nick Gio started extorting a lot of theater owners in Chicago, and they firebombed a couple of them with grenades. But these are the kind of lowlifes that the government cuts deals with. He ended up doing, I think, like 4 to 7 years for all the shit that he did. He ended up, though, getting killed several years later. Unsolved murder. Probably was an outfit hit, but it still remains unsolved. Now, sometimes in court, you know, it can be a little funny, a little entertaining. One of the witnesses, pretty big guy, steroid dude, juice head, completely bald, looked like Mr. Clean. He got on the stand. He was a nervous wreck. He testified that one of the Bonavolante brothers threatened him and said, if you don't pay the effing money, I'm going to beat your effing head black and blue so it looks like you got some fucking hair. And to see this guy say that out loud in the courtroom, being a bald guy, that if he didn't pay the money, they were going to beat him black and blue. So it looks like he got hair. The whole courtroom was busting out laughing, man. But again, just to see these big mob guys in court, watching their mannerisms, seeing how mean they are. Some of them look like mob guys, you know, straight out of the movie. And then others, you couldn't tell. They look like your neighbor. But that was one witness. I think his name was Palop. He was a victim of the Sam Carlisi crew, one of the witnesses, and got on the stand and told how he was being extorted. Now, at these trials, you see and hear everything. Some of these investigations are 5, 6 years long. You see all the surveillance photos like this one here. You get to watch all the videotapes, the surveillance tapes, read the transcripts, hear the audio. You see some of the autopsy photos, all the evidence, you hear from all the witnesses. But the government showed this at the Sam Carlisi trial. No, I'm sorry. The government showed this at the Family Secrets trial. On the left, you got boss of Chicago outfit, who had some health issues, who eventually died, Joe Nagel, Joe Ferriola. Then the guy on the right, second in command, upcoming boss of the outfit, Sam Wings Carlisi. And then he's speaking to the little bald guy with the sunglasses. That's little Jimmy the Man. He eventually became boss of the outfit when everybody went to jail. And then right next to him, one of my favorites, Rocco Infelice. He went away in the Good Shop Lollipop trial. And I'll never forget when Rocky told a black female judge, I'm a World War II paratrooper. I fought against one of Hitler's toughest regimes. Judge showed him no remorse, gave him a life sentence. But the prosecution showed this photo in the family secrets trial, claiming that I think it was at a McDonald's parking lot in Oak Brook or somewhere around there. But this was a meeting discussing the Spilatro hit in Bensonville. So it's a very powerful piece of evidence. And according to Nick Calabrese, if you believe him, all four of these men were here. Now, one of the lies I think Nicky told, but you don't know, he said that out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw Rocco and Felice in the basement when the Spilatros were killed, but he wasn't sure. Keeping in mind, he was testifying to this in 2005 when this happened in fucking 1986. So it's a long time ago. But for the most part, he had a pretty good memory. But the defense attorneys got up there and basically said, there's no way Rocky could have been at that house. You're lying. You're just putting the top bosses there because Rocky was under surveillance somewhere else. So that's definitely reasonable doubt right there, flat out. I would have held out if I was a juror. But me personally, knowing what I know, my vibe, I think fucking Rocky was there. Somehow, some way, maybe they got it wrong, or Rocky was able to ditch the government surveillance and somehow get to that house, because I think Rocky, like the rest of them, personally wanted to be there to get their licks and kicks in. That's how pissed they were. That's just my opinion. What do you guys think? You think Rocky and Felice was there that day? Now, here were two pieces of evidence that they showed on the big monitor in court at the Gus Alex trial and the Sam Carlisi trial, because two men like this, two higher-ups, could never be seen together. They actually denied knowing one another. They said they've never met each other. But here you got the taller Gus Alex shaking hands with the boss of Chicago outfit at the time, Sam Wings Carlisi. So it was obvious. Again, the government does a good job corroborating all the evidence and all the witnesses. They tie everything together. So they're showing here that these two actually know each other. Now, Carlisi's second trial, he didn't want to take any chances and go with one of these flashy, smoke and mirror, Johnny Cochran type lawyers like he did with Joe Lopez. Lopez tells the story of the first trial. Lopez showed up, young lawyer with a ponytail. Carlisi was fucking livid, made him cut off the ponytail. But so this time, Carlisi decided to go with a much more experienced, low-key Dan Webb. This guy was a prosecutor again, switched over to become a defense attorney. But these guys, they got a tough job. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. But he just really tried to pound on Lenny Patrick, Lavelli, and the 8 other defendants or witnesses. Some of the other witnesses were basically victims of the extortion crew or loan sharks or gambling guys that got in a little bit of trouble, decided to cooperate against the crew. But Dan Webb did his best to tear them guys a new asshole, especially Lenny Patrick and James Lavelli. But again, at the end, somehow, some reason, a lot of these juries, they find these freaking lowlifes credible. Now, here's Mark Vogel. He was one of the prosecutors. And again, not my favorite guy, but in Illinois, we've got the best prosecutors in the country. Hands down, they very seldom lose a case. And this guy definitely had a close relationship with the judge. It was quite obvious. Their families, their kids, their wives all know each other. That came out after the trial. That came up on appeal. But he was very, these prosecutors, they don't look at these mob guys and think, oh, these guys are mob guys like movie stars, especially during the closing argument. They point their finger and they start yelling. They get pretty dramatic. And again, every time he referred to Carlisi as being the boss of Chicago outfit, Carlisi would stand up and say, those are lies. You're fucking lying. Kept calling him a liar. And I never heard a defendant talk to a prosecutor like Sam Carlisi did. but you could see Carlisi, the temper that the man really had. But this guy, I didn't really like his style, but just pretty much dry with a monotone voice. But again, they're very well prepared. The evidence was overwhelming. In this particular case, the jury, the judge were definitely in tune with the prosecutor. Not sure if this guy ever became a defense attorney, but this was Carlisi's #1 enemy. And then you got the federal judge, James Plunkett. You know, these guys got it made, right? They're successful lawyers, usually graduated at the top of their class. And when they retire, they get a salary of $120,000 for the rest of their life. Not a bad gig. But some of these guys, when they take off the robe, they're just like us. They like to go out for dinner. They like to vacation. They like to have a few drinks. But it was quite obvious to me and probably everybody else in that courtroom, this judge, like most federal judges, are definitely pro-prosecution. There was a lot of evidence, a lot of real fucking dirt on Lenny Patrick, on James Lavelli, on the guy Palat, that the judge did not allow that into the courtroom. If the jury would have heard just a little bit of that evidence, especially against James Lavelli, some of the shit he did that wasn't reported, I think it could have been a different outlook. So, you know, it's pretty obvious it's a little lopsided. The defense attorneys definitely have their work cut out for them. And I heard at some of these major mob trials, the retainer alone to represent some of these major mob defendants could be a couple $100,000. That's just to start the trial. And like most federal judges, they go real hard on the defendants, especially any guys pertaining to organized crime. They really give them the maximum, but they go super lenient on rapists, drug dealers, murderers, gangbangers, career criminals. They cut deals with the devil to go after the big fish. It makes no sense at all. What did you gain by putting, you know, Sam Carlisi, Gus Alex away in their late 70s when you let 6-8 defendants who collectively have probably killed 15, 20 people, plus all the other crimes they committed? So, you know, kind of shame on you, Judge. I disagree with that, but that's how it goes, you know. And then again, in the end, like all federal trials, all the defendants, no surprise, were found guilty. They showed no remorse. They all were defiant to the end. Every one of them appealed. Carlisi in his 70s pretty much got a life sentence. Got like 14 years. Eventually died. Had a heart attack. Jimmy Marcello probably did a dozen years in jail. Eventually got out. Was at home with his family. Only to be pinched again a few months later on the family secrets trial. Zizzo, we know, eventually got out. Did like 6 years. Went MIA. Still missing today. Anthony Hatch did around 12 years. He got out, had a fallout with the German. Eventually got shot and killed. The other defendants did a few years and got out. So there wasn't, none of these guys did major time. But again, it was a major blow to Chicago outfit and their leadership. The prosecution, again, had a much stronger case. They had a solid investigation. And unfortunately, the juries believed some of these low-life witnesses. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed that trial, the Sam Carlisi trial. It's hard to remember everything because these, again, go back to the early 1990s. And again, this isn't stuff that I've read or watched on TV. This is just my views, my perspective of what it's like being inside the courtroom. Unfortunately, there's not too many trials left anymore, at least none that I'm interested in. But I may go to the El Chapo's son trial. I'm thinking about that. I'll keep you posted. He's being held in the MCC, so I may go to that trial for a couple of days. I thought for sure they would try El Chapo here. I would have definitely went to that trial. But as we all know, he got convicted in Brooklyn. But yeah, I'll definitely check out El Chapo's son's trial and do a little show on that. But my next story, I think what I'll do, I'll keep them in order as best as I can. I'm going to go to the we're going to talk about the Bobby Salerno trial. This is one of my favorites because I actually got a chance to meet one of the defendants, which is very rare. His son, Alex Salerno, was one of the defense attorneys that represented him. So you had a son representing his father. He allegedly was part of a hit team that killed Hal Smith, one of the largest bookies in the country. So we're going to talk about his trial next. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. To all my supporters, I appreciate everything. And to all my haters, like I said, I'm going to start exposing rats, guys like Red Wermet, Junior Calabrese, and others. So stay tuned, stay safe. Good night.